Good morning. Welcome back to Desk-Bound Aviator. I'm Steve, and today we're going to take a flight in the ToLiss A319, which I haven't done in a while, with you at least. And I thought what I would do is not completely, but almost recreate a flight done recently by a fellow named Matteo Chui, who does terrific instructional videos on how to fly, how to set up and fly various aircraft, including this one. And he recently did a flight from Heathrow in London down to an island called Jersey, which is just off the coast of Normandy in France, but is actually part of the UK. And right next to it is an island called Guernsey. Now, we're located right here in the middle of England at Manchester, England, north of London. And I thought we'd take a flight down to Guernsey. So it's kind of the same thing, just different airports, but basically the same airplane, including this British Airways livery that you're looking at here. And the reason I wanted to do this flight was really to walk you through the entire process by which I set up a flight in XPLANE. Not just starting up the aircraft, which I'll do, but also how I decide where to go and how I establish that flight plan, what software I use, and so forth. So you're welcome to come along for the ride and watch all this and see what you think. Some of it will be the same as what Matteo does, and some of the things that I do are a little different than what he does. The end result, hopefully, is the same. So you're welcome to come along. Glad you're here. And the first thing I'm going to do, sitting here, looking at this pretty airplane, is I'm going to call up the JAR ground handling people, and they will help us fill this aircraft. Right now you can see some of the doors are open. If on the other side the cargo doors are open. So I'm going to load up a little power generator, some catering trucks in the front and the back. This is all on the other side. I'll load up the stairs on this side since we don't have any gates right here. And I'll put on a couple of baggage loaders. So we'll just allow all of that to drive up. And you can see the plug for the generator going in. The door closes. And let's see what happens when the stair comes up. That may take just a little while. Here comes a loader. Let's take a look around there and watch that. So the loaders come and you see the door opens up. Now we'll come back over here and watch the stair and see if that door opens up automatically. Not sure if it will or not. All right, he's up against the door now. And it looks like it's not opening up automatically, so I'm going to hit my number 3 button and see if that door opens up. Yeah, there it goes. So now the passengers can board the aircraft. And we'll come around the other side. Whoops, wrong key. Wrong keys. Let's go there. Yeah, same thing with the starboard side, forward and aft doors. Looks like we've got to open those up. Now, ToLiss has an option to open them automatically, which I think they were set to do, but for some reason, those two guys want to close up when I open up the ground handling. The cargo doors, they do open. And I've got a Lua script, actually, which allows me to set some keyboard keys to open up these doors on the A319. Very nice feature, and if any of you are interested in that, I can probably either tell you where to get that or maybe attach it to this video. I'm not sure if I can do that, but we'll figure out a way. Just let me know if you're interested in a Lua script that allows you to open and close, set up keys to open and to close the doors on the A319. All right, so now let's figure out where we're going to go. And in order to do that, I'm going to go over to my browser. I use Firefox. You can use any browser you like. And I'm looking right now at a Google map, personal Google map that you can establish. And I use it with Google Drive. So you can establish a personal map, and you can place markers on that map anywhere you like and in a variety of different styles. I'll pick this one, for example, which is, oops, did I say Manchester? Yeah, Manchester's up here. We're actually at Birmingham. I'm sorry. We're at EGBB. So if you put one of these markers on this map and click it, you can modify the colors of it. You can modify the icon that it has. And you can go in here and you can rename it and do anything you want with it. Well, not quite anything, but most anything. So I've done this, and you look at this map and you say, well, what are all these stars? These are all of the autogate airports in the world. Now, you don't see United States and South America here, Canada, and all of that. That's because I have those on a separate map. There's a maximum of 500 icons you can place on any given map, and if I tried to do the whole world, it would go beyond that, and then you find you can't enter anymore. So I've set this up as my world map. I actually have another version of it with all of the icons lit. This is my world tour map, which I've saved as world tour, and you can see that over here. And on this, when I visit an airport on my world tour, which I'm on right now, I just change the color of it from red to white. So I just recently landed at Liverpool, and now we're over here at, we're going to start from Birmingham down here, this star. And what we're going to do is fly from Birmingham down to Guernsey off the coast of Normandy. So that's going to be our route. Now, once we've figured that out, then I go over here to SkyVector and I type that route in. So I'll type in EGBB, I think is what it was, and enter that. And it says Birmingham Airport, fine. And then I go to the next level down and I type in EGJB and I hit return and it says Guernsey. So there's our route. Now, of course, most airline routes are not quite a straight rum line, as they call them, between 2 points. They have curves to them and waypoints that you go to. So in order to figure all that out, I jump over to a wonderful app called Navigraph Charts, which you see here. And Navigraph Charts, we discussed this before on this channel, it allows you to play around with something on the order of 36,000 different routes and patterns to every airport in the world. It's an astonishing subscription-only service, but it's well worth the cost of admission. So within Navigraph Charts, I'm going to go up here to Flights and select New Flight. And I want to select Manual Input, and it asks me for the origin airport, which is EGBB, Birmingham. I'll hit return and scroll down to the next line and type in EGJB. And then I'll go down here and tap on the Create. Now we starts getting interesting. The first thing you need to know is what's the weather pattern going on here in Birmingham. So to do that, we come back over here to SkyVector and just put our cursor right there next to Birmingham Airport's icon, and it indicates that it has a weather station there. And from looking at that, I can see that the winds right now are at 170 at 10 knots. So basically out of the south. All right, so I come back over here to Navigraph, and and I go to the departure. Now by tapping this key over here, you can either display that area on the map or you can open a charts list. Within that, you have every taxi route, every approach route, every star, every SID, and reference information for everything you wanted to know about Birmingham Airport. So for example, if I look at airport here, I can see that, well, it's only got one runway, and that runway goes basically at 150 degrees, 146 to be accurate, and in the reverse direction 330. So if our winds are coming from about 180, obviously we want to choose runway 15 as our takeoff runway. So let's go back over to our route. Go up to this X here, brings us back to this page. I'll just make all these other things disappear. There's a bunch of ways you can do this. What I'm going to do to make life easy is I'm just going to pick auto route right here, and it asks us whether we want high or low airways. I'll go ahead and pick high, and it gives us a calculated route based in this kind of direction, which is kind of where we wanted to go anyway. We know from the winds coming out of Birmingham, out of the south, that we want to take runway 15. So I'm going to select here 15, and the departure is going to be Mosu 15, because that's the best departure for that particular runway. And that gives us this kind of a direction. I'll zoom in a little bit. So we're going to be going on 150 degrees, and then making a right turn and heading over to Gloucester and down that way. Now when we get to our approach, because the island is fairly limited, we can take a look at all of the charts on the island of Guernsey by going to the taxi tab and go to airport. And it shows us basically, again an east-west pattern. So if we're going to be landing to the east, we can see that runway 09 is the runway. West would be 27. And the choice I'll make here is the ILS version of that. So I go up to approaches. It's confusing because here it's runways, here it's approaches. The approaches is the runway that you're going to be selecting. And I select runway 9. And it doesn't do anything, which is kind of strange. Oh, I know, it's runway ILS. No, I picked the wrong one. My bad. When you do that, it gives you a choice of whether to just pick final or to pick GUR. And it was a little confusing to me when I first saw this, what that GUR was. And what it is, that's Guernsey, the island, but it's also a pattern that starts at Guernsey, and it goes to the west, circles around, comes back in, and then allows you to land. So it's a little confusing. It makes you look like you're going to be going directly here, and you are. You're going to be going directly here, then you're going to be flying to the west and then back to the east. You would think maybe they route you to a point out here and just bring you in, but it apparently doesn't work that way. And to be honest, that's fairly common in Europe, I've found. So now we want our arrival, that's the star pattern, and because we've chosen that runway, ILS 09, it's giving us an option of one star pattern that's the best one to pick, which is GUR2H. And now it makes this dotted line green, because GUR2H goes directly from this waypoint, Big No, directly down to GUR, and then we do our approach pattern into the runway. So there's our route. Now, having established that route completely, we can take a look at it here. There it all is, and we can save it. And we can then come back over here to the Flights tab, and now we can say export that route. We come down and choose XPLANE11 FMS, and it asks us if we want to save it by that name and locate it within the FMS plans folder within XPLANE. And that's exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to save that, and that's done. So having done that, first of all, let's come back over here. I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to copy this whole route. Just put it to the clipboard. And now we can get rid of all these windows and just see our route. Now let's come back over here. First thing we can do is go ahead and paste that route right in here. You may recall that SkyVector isn't crazy about having runway numbers next to anything. So I'm going to eliminate that. So we've got the origin and destination. You really don't even need that, but it'll work with that. If I hit return, there's our route. And you see it eliminated the star and the SID. But it shows you the basic pattern of the route. Now what I'm going to do, just to further cement this whole thing for our purposes, I'm going back over here to SimBrief. Now I had a route in SimBrief. I'm going to come up here and select New Flight. And here we set up the entire thing in SimBrief, and I'll show you why I'm going to do this. You may say, well, why bother doing SimBrief if you've already got the route established as an FMS file within the flight plans folder? Well, here's why. First, I'm going to designate the airline, BAW. Our flight number today, take your pick. I'm going to pick 221. It departs EGBB, and the arrival is EGJB. Gives us an alternate of EGLL, and I'm not sure, I think that's Heathrow. And now we want to choose our airframe. And so you open up this long list, and I'm going to choose A319. Asks you for climb factors and climb profiles and so forth. I've already established over here a preference within SimBrief to allow for 30 minutes of contingency fuel and 60 minutes of reserve fuel. So that's already established within SimBrief. I don't even have to do anything about that. The scheduled flight times, just a little over an hour. Departure runway has already figured out that we're going to be using runway 15 because of the wind pattern. It knows that the wind pattern on our arrival is basically north-south, so it's arbitrarily selecting runway 27. We're using runway 09, so I'll go ahead and change that. Gives us a taxi time, extra fuel. We don't need it, it's established here. I'll go ahead and use auto for the altitude. We'll see what SimBrief gives us as a good altitude to fly this flight. Same thing for passengers and cargo. I'll just use auto. ZFW, zero fuel weight, is auto. And so that's all done. I'm going to go ahead and paste in our route again, and again eliminate the runway numbers, just like that. So copy that and paste that into this line. I don't know if that particular route was part of their recipe, but I'm using the route that Navigraphs gave me, and now we can analyze it. It says it's a good route. So having done that, I'm going to generate an operational flight plan, an OPP. Choose on it for a minute or so. Less than a minute, actually. And now we have our flight plan. So now what I'm going to do, you see a flag that occurs right up here, a notification from, this is from a separate piece of software that I downloaded from SimBrief called SimBrief Downloader. It's an adjunct, if you will, to SimBrief. And once you have that loaded along with SimBrief, on a Macintosh this is, it gives you a notification that you can export your FMS to selected locations. So I'm going to go ahead and tap that, And you see what it's done is it's saved PDF files to 2 different locations. I occasionally fly the Airbus A350, which has a charts folder, and it's placed a PDF into that folder. It's also placed a PDF into the Avatabs charts folder within my Avatabs plugin. I can close this. If I want to, I haven't done so, but if I wanted to, I could also scroll down here and choose XPLANE11, and it would create an FMS file and place it within the FMS plans folder. Obviously, we don't need to do that. We've already done it from Navigraphs. So we don't need to do that. That's why that isn't selected. So now we'll just go back here. We can reference this later on if we want to, but we really won't need to, and I'll show you why. Okay, back to XPLANE. We've got our plane loaded now, pretty much. Let's go inside into the cockpit. We'll go up here to the top. Now we've got our ground power available, and batteries, not sure whether they're on or not. So let's just go ahead and tap on ground power. It indicates batteries are off, so we'll go ahead and turn those on. Next thing I'll do is activate the ADIRs by turning the dial to the nav position, and it aligns them. You can rotate this dial over to STS and this one up to 1, which in some aircraft it'll show you how long it'll take to align the ADIRs. In this one it doesn't show you anything. I'll come down here and rotate this upper light fixture a little bit. Put the standby compass on, the dome light can go to bright, and I'll light the emergency, or arm the emergency lights between the seats in case of an emergency. That's all we need to do there. Now we can come down to, let's go below a little bit first. Come down here, there's some more lights on the console that we can illuminate, brighten up a bit. That's all we need to do on the console. I'll come up here and shift over to the left. Here's some more lights we need to turn on. That little center dial right there. I'll do the floor lights like so. We can shift back over to the other side. Same thing here, the little center dial and this outer dial. Just illuminates the NDs. And lastly, we can come down to the upper part of this console, and we've got a couple of light dials here we need to rotate to light up the center NDs. And on the MCDU, you have a little button here called Bright. If you hold that down, it'll illuminate both MCDUs, the co-pilot and the pilot side. So having done all of that, I use a key to pop up my MCDU. And that's just like that. I'll leave it at that position, I guess, for now. And I also want to pop the first officer's version of the MCDU, and I'll show you why in a second. We go to the init page of this unit, and you see it says load right up here. I know I have the whole flight plan loaded, so I'll go ahead and hit load. And it gives me a list of files that are available. We're looking for EGBB to EGJB. There it is. So that's done. Our flight number today, if I put my cursor here, I can go ahead and use my keyboard. Our flight number today is going to be BAW221. Excuse me. Place that there. Now we want to align the IRS. Now in order to do that, we come over to the first officer's MCDU and we select monitor. First we press the data button, then we select monitor. And within monitor, we can see our GPS number 2 position. We want the positions in both of these units to be the same, and we use the GPS 2 as our reference for what the accurate position is. For latitude, it says it's 52 degrees 27 minutes 1 second north, 52:27:1. Translates in a little different style, but that's basically the same. For longitude, it says it's 0144.2 west. Now here we've got 0144.3 west, so first we have to move our selection from the left side over to the right, and you do that by tapping the right key adjacent to longitude. You see those little arrows now indicate we've selected this side to enter. And we want to change that 3 to a 2. So we go down here to these 2 arrows, and I never know which to pick. It's opposite on both sides. But I picked right, the upper arrow, change that to a 2. Now that we've done that, we can make the secondary MCDU go away, and we can tap on Align IRS, and you'll shortly see an indication of that displayed here on the ND. Now we need to know what our cost index is, and in order to do that, I've got to get my cursor out of the unit. There, I'm going to jump over here to our electronic flight bag, our EFB. And within that, the first button is Charts. All right, I want to make sure I'm picking the current charts, so I'm just going to first off select up 1 directory and then pick Charts again. All right, now I know that these are the current charts, and the one I'm looking for is EGBB to EGJB right there. That's the chart we just created from SimBrief. Placed it into the charts folder within the Avatab plugin. I'll zoom in a little bit on that, and let's scroll up. This is page 1 of the chart, and it gives us some very interesting information. For example, right here it says cruise system CI-15. Now this is a little different than what Mateo does. Mateo uses the this device, the ToLiss Interactive Simulation Control System, and he does the traditional way of using that as outlined in their manual. I decided to try using SimBrief to do it, and I find it a little nicer system to use, and it results in the same result, I believe. At least I haven't had any difficulties doing flights using this system. So I use this, CI-15. Bring my cursor over here and type 15 and enter it into cost index. Cruise flight level, you'll find that right here. Flight steps EGBB 0300, 300. And it enters the temperature automatically. Now that that's all complete, we can hit our left arrow here and start to fill out the fuel requirements for the flight. First, it wants to know what the ZFW is. The ZFW is right here under estimated takeoff weight, landing weight, and ZFW weight, 57.489. We can round that out to 57.5. Point, not a comma. Whoops. 57.5. Thank you. And block fuel. To get the block fuel, we have to just use our cursor to move the screen up. And there's our block fuel, 67.9, rounded out to the tens figures. So I'm going to round that out to 68. 6.8 is really where it is. 6.8. 6.8. And we'll enter that into the block fuel area, and that gives us sufficient time for additional fuel for contingency and for going around and returning to London if we need to. So that's all set. Because that's all set, we now can tap on the airport key. And I want to go through the plan just a little bit here. And in order to do that, I'll jump back over here and rather than move the MCDU around, which is tricky to do, I'm just going to tap on this screen, and then I'll move the MCDU over to it. You see what I mean about it's tricky. You push on that thing, and you can move it, but sometimes it doesn't want to stay moved. So we popped that ND screen. All of these ND screens on the ToLiss do pop up, and that's a terrific feature, which you'll see later. Now that our IRS is aligned, you can see our route displayed. And one thing I'm going to do is rotate the flight mode annunciator, the FMA. I'm going to rotate that down to plan view so we can step through our route and make sure that it's correct. All right, so once again, we'll tap up so we can go to the top, and we tap on the left key next to our departure runway, and we select departure, and I want to make sure this is correct, so I'm going to re-enter it. This is 15, and let's see, what was our SID if we had one? I'm going to go back over here to Navigraph Charts, and it says MOSU 15. So we'll hit our arrow here, and there it is. And there's no transition, so I'll say none. And we'll go ahead and tap on Flight Plan, and we'll insert it. And now you see it established on our route. So it wasn't established in the FMS file. That's interesting. But it is now. So because of that, let's go on down here to our arrival, EGJB, and select arrival. And again, we're going to be landing on ILS 09. And our star was GUR2H. GUR2H. There's a bunch of them. There's GUR2H. Our transition was GUR1. Or our approach was GUR, rather. And there's no transition, so we'll go ahead and enter that on the flight plan and insert it. Now let's step through the whole route and make sure that we're in good shape. I want to just zoom in a little bit on that so I can see it closer. And you do that with this upper arrow. And that'll go through each waypoint of the route all the way down. Here's GUR, and as I mentioned, it's going to make us go out to the west and do a big circle around. And then come back in, C109, and land on our runway 9. So it's good. Come back up to flight plan, and now we can set up the performance aspects of the flight by pressing the performance key or button right here. This gives us our V1 speeds, but we need to enter them properly, and for this I do use the ToLiss screen. Whoops, wrong button. All right, let's move that over. It's easier to move. And we'll pick loading performance. And in order to get our speeds, we need to first tell it what flap situation we're going to use. And let's see how long the runway is here at Birmingham. Is it Birmingham we're coming from? Yeah, Birmingham. Let's see how long the runway is. We'll go over to Navigraph Charts, and we'll go to Birmingham, display the chart list, and we can go to airport, and it looks like we've got a nice long runway, 10,000 feet is runway 15 in Birmingham. So based on that, we can use flaps 1. And it gives us our V speeds of 148, 148, and 151, which we now enter here. And of course, when you go through this process, if you just start typing a number here, you put your cursor there and start typing, you don't see anything. And that's because for some reason in ToLiss you've got to tap that frame of that MCDU, and that selects it. And now you can type 148 and enter that, 148 and enter that, and 151 and enter that for the V2 speed. Transition altitude, we'll come back to that. Our flex temp speed is going to be 70. I'll come back to that transition altitude in a second. Flaps THS. You can, if you want to, enter the THS shown here as up 0.6. I have found that it isn't necessary to do that. All you really need to do is just enter the flap setting, and that works just fine. So you can avoid that extra step of entering the THS. I forget what THS means. It's probably on my list here somewhere, but I don't see it. All right, so now let's make this go away. We were dealing with the transition altitude. In order to find out what transition altitude is, again, I have to get my cursor out of there. I'm going to jump back over here. And now I know why I had the MCDU over to the left. There. I'm going to jump back over here. And what I want to do now is go to airports. So I'll type in EGBB for Birmingham. And then I come over to this little icon and tap that, and that gives me a choice of airport, arrival, departure, approach, and reference. And what I want is, let's say, approach, and let's say runway 15. Now, obviously, we're not approaching runway 15, but what that does is it tells me what the transition altitude is for Birmingham Airport. Any of these charts will tell you this, but that's the way I get to it. So the transition altitude is 6,000. Now we can make that go away. And while we're on this page, we can make that go away, and we can make that JB. And now we can enter some charts here. We can enter our approach chart, which is going to be ILS runway 9. There that is. We'll come back to that in a bit. And we can enter the pattern. Let's see, airport. What does the airport look like? There it is. And lastly, we can enter parking stands and coordinates. And there's that is. So we've got everything we need to know about our arrival airport. And now what I'll do is come over here and select Maps. And this will help us find our taxi route out to runway 15. Zoom in a bit on that. Sometimes it takes a while to load those screens. So our transition altitude of 6,000 feet is good. Therefore, last thing we need to do is the NavRad panel to select our ILS runway coordinate and our course level. And what I'm going to do is leave that blank for the time being, because I've had conversations with some of the folks from ToLiss, and they've indicated to me that you really don't need to enter the ILS frequency or course here, that it will be entered automatically by the system. So I'm going to test that out, and so I'm not going to enter anything there just yet. I'll instead just go back to the flight plans page, and we can make the MCDU go away. While I'm sitting here looking at this, I'll rotate this up to the arc mode, and I'll give myself a little more distance on this display over here so we can see our whole route. And we'll come back and we'll adjust the FMS or FMA panel, glare shield panel. We'll come back and adjust that in a little bit. But first thing I want to do is to flip over this lower screen down here to the APU panel. Then I'm going to come up to the upper panel and activate the APU by hitting the master switch. It starts cranking that up. It takes a couple of seconds before you can start it, and now I'll do that. Now if we keep an eye on that lower screen, you can see that the flap is open and the APU is ramping up, getting ready to power up the aircraft. So that's the drill. That's how I establish a route and how I establish the flight plan and how I establish waypoints and landing and taking off and so forth. With those three components, sky vector, SimBrief, and Navigraph charts. If you have all those three, you can do the same thing. I'm getting closer here. When this says APU available, which it now does, we can come back up here and tap on APU bleed. The generator, as you see, is blank, so that indicates that it's already on. And now that the aircraft is being powered by the APU as well as the ground power, we can go ahead and turn the ground power off. You'll see a blink here when that happens. But we come the lights back on because we've got the APU power. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and turn on our fuel pumps so that that's ready. We're going to be backing up and starting any moment. The first things first, we can make our ground guys go away. Call up our GHD by JAR Design and just say drive away. That takes them a little while to do that. Starting off with that guy, and the door closes automatically. There go the baggage loaders. And lastly come the caterers. Let's see if the doors close automatically. They do. How about that? All right, so they're leaving. We can now call our pusher. And in order to do that accurately, I want to, first of all, go down here and see. We're going to be heading up here to runway 15. We are parked right here in the direction of runway 15. So basically we want to back up maybe and go to the right so that we can come out this way and enter one of these taxiways and go in that direction. So we're backing out to the right. Let's let him know that.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to go.
I want to go back to the right.
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
All right, while he's driving up, we can come in here and set up our upper panel. First thing we need to do is set the altimeter for the proper baro or HPA height. And I can do that by looking at sky vector, as you saw before. I also have my handy Lua plugin, or actually it's not Lua, it's, they're all my plugins, by the way. It's actually a Python interface, which is XP NOAA Weather. And I've used this for years. It's a terrific addition.
All doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
All right, he's connecting. So all I have to do is type in EGBB there, hit return, and now it tells me the QNH for Birmingham is 1011. And now we can make that go away. We've got these dials set. There's nothing else you need to do here on an Airbus. Unlike Boeing's, you don't need to set any of these dials. What I will do is raise our altitude here to 6,000, which is our transition altitude.
So connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
I will in a second. First thing I want to do is use my double dot here to, oops, I guess I can't. I was going to get rid of this dot here. I want to make sure that that's off when we take off. Okay, I want to go outside and show you. Let's use this view. You see we've still got our ground handling stuff arrayed back here. And you could go into the ground handling screen and say hide all. There's another way to do that. And that is to simply release your park brakes. If you had a auto gate up against the aircraft, that would back away at the same time. But when I release the...
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
And there he goes. All right, so we come in here. We've got our fuel pumps on. I'm going to rotate this dial to the start position and push up engine 2. And if we switch this over to engine, we can monitor that here. The thing I really look at is the N2 fan speed, the big center fan, which is right now being powered by the APU. When that gets to about 25%, it starts introducing fuel directly from the fuel tanks. And so we can now come back down here. There's no fuel on and off switch to use like there is on a Boeing, but we can then turn on engine 1 and get that started. While we're looking here, I'll go ahead and set our auto brake to max. That's part of the basic config setup. And really not too much else to do here. We can take a look at hydraulics. And let's see what else we want to look at here. Wheels, electric, doors, condition APU, pressures, bleed. Flight controls is what I'm interested in. One thing we need to do is to set our spoilers to the armed position. And I do that on my yoke with a yoke button. I just press it down.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
All right, park brake set. See that displayed here.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
So I don't see any indication of the spoilers being armed here. I do here, but it doesn't really show me anything on this display. All right, I'll come back up to the upper panel, and now that we've got our engines going, we really don't need the APU on anymore. So I'll go ahead and just flip off the master switch. That cuts off the bleed automatically, and as it spools down, you'll see the start light extinguish. Our engine bleed is both on, the packs are on, as well as the engine generator. So
Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, the engine, the power to the aircraft now is coming directly from the engines, not from the APU. And so let's make sure we've got our passengers. We should have done this before, shouldn't we? Passengers should be belted in. We can go ahead and turn on the taxi light to, the nose light rather, up to taxi. And we can turn on the runway turn-off lights. And probably should have earlier turned on a beacon light and the nav logo lights to make sure people knew we were aboard. But I was too busy explaining how we set up a route, didn't even think of it. And I'll go ahead and turn on the strobe lights while I'm at it. So, most of the lights on. Take a look down here. Oh, I know one other thing we need to do up here is to press one of these call buttons, because that's part of the configuration setup. And the last part is to set the flaps. Down here, flaps 1. You can see the indication of that here. And now that indicator goes away. And the last thing is to press this takeoff config button, and it says we're normal. So that's it. Here's our exit route from the airport. What I'll do is zoom back here, and looks like our avatab kind of zoomed out as well, didn't it? All right, let's get that a little closer so we can see where we're taxiing. There we go. Okay, we're getting near the end of our route here. I've popped up this ND, which is nice because it allows me to see my ground speed, which I want to keep at or below 25. And then as I approach a corner, we want that to come down to 15 knots. And if it's a 90-degree turn, it's better to do it at about 10 knots. We'll let that nose hang out a little bit as we make the turn so that the gear itself is on top of the line. And there we go. All right, let's pull up here, put the park brake on, and take a look down below. Let that screen go for the time being. I want to rotate, I should have rotated this transponder dial down to TA to communicate with the tower. Now that we're here ready to take off, I'll go ahead and put it on TA-RA. Come over here, we can also turn off the the engine start switch over to normal mode. I'm going to rotate the weather system dial, or knob right over here, to back to 1. The mode can stay on weather. PWS I'll put on auto. I'll raise the tilt up to the 5 position. GCS can go to auto, like so. Multi-scan can go to auto. And that's about all you need to do there. Go ahead and turn on the radio panel. We don't really need to use these. That's all done automatically. But we'll turn them on anyway just so we can see them. One thing I want to do is just check on the FMS, on the init page, to see. No, I'm thinking of Boeing's where you stop. Yeah, here it is. No, I was looking at this. I wasn't certain that we entered our cruise flight level, but of course we did, and it's going to be flight level 300, so I can let that go. Now, the way we're doing this today is we're doing it in a couple of steps. We're starting off at 6,000 feet, and then once we near that, we'll go ahead and raise this up to 300. That's pretty much the way actual pilots do it in the real world, so we might as well follow their pattern. We've got our auto brake set to maximum. There's no rejected takeoff on an Airbus, but you do set the auto brakes to maximum position. They are auto, so if they are required, they will be implemented automatically at the maximum position. We've got our QNH set to 1011. I've set it up within the ToLiss preferences to do both sides as well as the center altimeter panel automatically. It just does them all 3 of them at once. Some of you purists may prefer to do it manually yourself. That's okay. Everything else looks good. Take a look at our takeoff lights. We can go ahead and turn on the runway landing lights. We can raise the nose light up to the taxi position. Seat belts are on. We want to make sure the probe heat is on. This is the pitot tube that gives us all the information about our flight speed and altitude and wind patterns and so forth. So that's important that that be on. And that's about it for the Airbus upper panel. Very simple process in an Airbus, at least in an assumed Airbus. So we'll just check here and make sure there's nobody in our way. Nobody landing that I know of. That looks good. I don't have my other plug-in here, World Traffic 3. I don't have that loaded today. It's a small airport and there wouldn't be any traffic down at Guernsey anyway, so I didn't bother loading that today. At larger airports, it's fun to have because you see lots of traffic coming in and out, landing, and getting in your way. All right, so we're pretty much set to take off here. We got our flaps set. Let's release the park brakes, taxi on out.
Air Canada 661.
Air Canada 661, ground, good morning.
Right, sir. 937 Golf.
Pop up our ND so we can see what we're doing.
Thanks.
You can even do the engine panel. Please ignore that. Engine's up to about 50%. Brakes off. Throttle forward to manual toga.
Clearance hello, 181 standing by airway to Hamilton with Echo.
Swoop 181 is cleared to the Hamilton Airport. Halifax 4 departure, flight plan route, squawk 3610.
Swoop 181 cleared to you, Hamilton, Halifax 4 flight plan route, squawk...
There's our annunciator for 100 knots.
Swoop 181, you read back.
Coming up on 151 rotate
We
speed.
have Papa, Swoop 181.
V1, rotate.
Clearance, good morning, Suncor 3428. We're at gate 18 with Papa. PDC is 937 Hotel.
Encore 3428, PDC is correct, and
Positive
still
brake,
correct.
gear up.
3428, thanks.
Gear is indeed up. Flaps can come up. Press the AP1 button. So we're now on autopilot. Go ahead and turn off the runway turn-off lights and the taxi lights. Leave the landing lights on until we reach 10,000. We bring our throttle back down to thrust climb over here. The airplane will continue to gain speed up to 250. As we go through the clouds on a murky morning here at Birmingham. I see the data is still there, but it's fine, it's working. We'll go ahead and increase this altitude to 10,000. Our next stage. Speed's approaching 250. And it should stay in there until we reach 10,000. All right, now that we've passed our 10,000 level, we can turn the landing lights off. And what I want to do is pop this screen over here and let's increase the distance a little bit. And you can see here by these arrows that with an altitude, a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, the distance between our top of climb and top of descent is pretty close. So what I'm going to do is open up the FMC, and I'm going to go over here to progress, and I'm going to change 300 here, just kind of arbitrarily, to, it's an even number, so I'll change it to, let's say, 260, and we'll enter that here. New cruise altitude, okay. And then I'm going to lower this guy here down to 26,000. And you should see those. There we go. Yeah, now you see those arrows spread out a little bit, which kind of helps us out in planning our flight. And while we have the FMC up, there's a couple of little chores we can take care of here. First one I'll look at is this nav radio question. And there really isn't anything there yet, so let's hold off for the time being. I'll go to performance though, and right now we're in the climb phase. If we go to the next phase, that's cruise. It says our distance to top of descent is 88 miles. If we go to the phase after that, that's descent. And if we go to the phase after that, that's our approach. Here is where we set up our approach parameters. Almost at top of climb right now. All right, so once again, I have to move this because I want to look at, oops, the situation at Guernsey. So that's EGJB. All right, it says winds are 180 again, as it predicted earlier. The QNH is 1016. Type that in, place it in the QNH slot. Temperature is 11 degrees centigrade. Winds are 180 at 16 knots. /16. That goes in there. Now it's giving us a transition level of 10,000 feet, and I'm pretty sure that's not the case. So in order to find out, I always do that. I always type a number, and I've got the darn cursor in the MCDU, and that doesn't work. Let's go ahead and eliminate these for the time being, and we'll jump here back to airports, and what we're looking for is any transition there? No. Well, here we are for the transition for runway 09 at Guernsey, and we see transition altitude 5,000. So I'm going to type 50 and put it there. And our designated height is indicated on the chart for a straight-in ILS landing using radio navigation rather than barometric. It's 200 feet. So I'll type in 200 and enter it into DH. And so it gives us our VAAP, our threshold speed, if you will, of 137. That may have to be modified if we encounter any headwinds, but that's kind of a good ballpark speed for our landing. Make that go away, and might as well leave this right here so that we can see us as we approach. You will see our icon on this chart as we get nearer to Guernsey. It'll come down this way, and then we'll make our turn and head out. And my guess is we will go up north, come around, and back south, and then land in that direction. Bring our NDs back up. can see our longer view over on co-pilot's screen. And now let's pop this up again and set our descent winds. We do that by going to flight plan, and we want to pick the waypoint right after top of descent. We hit the right key next to that waypoint, and you see wind data. On wind data, we see wind request, but and now we see the asterisk. I was going to say, if you don't see the asterisk, you can't do anything with it. And as I was saying that, the asterisk popped up. So that's nice. What we can do then is tap the key next to that. And we want to copy, we don't have to copy anything. It's all set for us. All we need to do is just return. So it's 261 at 39 at 180 degrees. So we just hit return twice and we're back in the flight plan. So now our winds have been established for our descent into the FMC. Good deal. Last step that I want to just nail down is this issue of the ILS frequency. And I don't see it indicated, which is interesting. I'm going to leave that screen on there and come back to that in a little while. My guess is maybe we have to reach the top of the star in order to get that posted in here. I'm pretty sure it works, but I just am not sure how. So let's give it a little more room to maneuver. And if we don't see anything happen here, then we'll just go to the chart, we'll figure out what the frequency is, and we'll enter it into those slots. Not that much time. Now let's see what our FMC says is the distance to top of descent. I thought that was on the performance page, or rather the progress page, but I guess not. Okay, we're on the cruise part of the performance section, and it says 2 TD, distance 18 miles. When it gets to 5 miles out or so, I generally then go ahead and start our descent. So the next question is, well, what is our descent level? And in order to answer that question, I'll make these screens go away for a moment. I'm going to jump back over here to our approach plate, and I'm going to scroll down to this section of it. And it tells us that our approach level for Guernsey on this ILS runway 09 is going to be 2,000 feet. There's our frequency and approach course, which we may need to enter manually. We'll see. All right, so 2,000 feet. Let's go over here now that we're approaching our top of descent, and we'll go ahead and dial this down to 2,000. So that's now set. It isn't activated. You activate it by pushing this button with a single dot, a single finger, if you will, like so. Then it'll activate the descent process toward that target altitude. But it indicates that it is set. And now as we see that arrow approaching, I'm going to come back up here, and it says TD1, so I'll go ahead and click that button. And we see our altitude bug, or altitude indicator here on the MFD or the PFD. I get all these MFDs, I get all these FDs mixed up. Anyway, this is now descending. You can see the numbers start to change. And one thing you'll notice, and I can pop that up so you can see it better. I'll do these two guys. You might see a little green dot right there on that yellow line. That green dot is an indication of our descent slope. And occasionally, if you get too far ahead or too far behind the descent slope, you'll see that dot move. If the dot is down here in this section, it means you're above the descent slope. If it's up here, you're below it. which is not a bad thing either way. It just tells you where you are in relation to the ideal. And so the green dot right now is pretty much ideal. Our speed is also ideal because it's right between these brackets, and the flight management system or computer will lower this the bracketed speed appropriately as we get lower in altitude. When we get down to 10,000 feet, you'll see we'll be down at 250 knots rather than 290, 295, which is what we are right now. And there's the Isle of Guernsey. So while we've got just a minute here, I'm going to zoom in on our chart and check our frequency. It says 108.10. So we'll pop the MCDU and we go to the radio nav page, and by golly, look at what it tells us. 108.10. Course direction is 88 degrees. And now you can see our aircraft approaching. So it works. You do not need to set anything here. The aircraft will do it automatically. Nice to know. As you recall, our waypoint is GUR, so we're going to be actually flying directly down to the island and making a sharp right turn. Here we are approaching 10,000 feet. We can go ahead and throw the landing lights on. People can see us. Looks like a nice day down here in Guernsey. There's our speed change, and you see us dropping now precipitously. And now that we've passed this little red indicator here, I'll go ahead and bring the speed brakes back in and arm them. And I'll go ahead and drop the flaps one notch. When we pass the second red marker, we can drop the flaps another notch. Here we come back in off the chart. Keeping to the route line very nicely. I'm going to go ahead and press the APPR button for approach. That arms the system. Indicates to us that we've already acquired the locator. The glide slope has yet to be acquired. And we've passed that second red mark, so we can go ahead and lower the flaps a second notch. You see that on this display. There we go, down to the second position. And we passed the third notch, so I'll go ahead and do that. And then we go ahead and lower the gear. TA only, so we can come down here and rotate our transponder to TA only.
Approaching 09.
Don't really need this one anymore. There's our runway. We'll let the autopilot do its thing.
400. 300. 100 above. 200. Minimum. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20.
2. 10 meters remaining. 900 remaining. 600 remaining. 300 remaining.
Yes, well, that was an interesting landing. Let's pull off here and clean this thing up.
30 remaining.
Looks like a Austrian air is occupying our gate. And it's not even a gate, it's just an open area, so we'll use the ladder right about here. So there you are, the British Airways ToLiss A319 here in Guernsey, lovely island just off the coast of Normandy of all places, but still part of the UK. Glad you came with me on that flight. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been fun doing as always. I will see you soon.